sends her roses and lines he composes, things a lady loves. All it down a man, now you do and do her. All it down a man and you we.
All right, here we go. Another Square Dance Callers Talking. Tonight, I've got Tim Pepper with me tonight. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Charlie. Thanks.
Man, it's a pleasure to get to talk to you. As we were talking before, I'm having some computer issues. I'm working off of my phone, so I'm not sure how this is going to run on YouTube, but we're going to get it out. But we're going to talk about you tonight, man. So you're a Square Dance caller. We've talked about that. How long have you been Square Dance calling?
Started in 1982, February 82. So nice. I guess I'm in my 43rd year, I think.
Very nice. Okay. And I ask everybody, what got you started?
Well, I started dancing when I was 13.
Okay.
My parents were dancing. And my mom said as soon as I got as tall as she was, they would let me take lessons. Okay. So that was 13 years old.
Wow.
So I went through class, graduated, joined a teen club, actually called the Moon Spinners in Riverside, California.
Riverside.
Danced for about 3 years, and then high school got in the way. High school athletics, girls, everything got in the way. So I shut down square dancing. And then it was when I was out of college that I decided to take it up again. So I went to another beginner class, and then I went to a halfway dance. And as I'm dancing at this dance, I'm listening to the callers. There were many callers. It was like a square dance association event, so they had a lot of different callers. And I'm listening. I'm thinking, you know what? I think I can do as good as some of these guys. I want to give this a try. And lo and behold, I bought a record. I bought another record, bought 2 or 3 more records. Yeah. And so I'm just singing them at the house. And so my parents said, if you really want to do this, we're going to spot you beginning equipment. Anything above this, you'll have to go on your own. So my mom bought me a Hilton Micro 75A.
Okay.
And a couple of the Hilton folded horn speakers, got a microphone, and all of a sudden, I'm almost a caller. And then I went to my first time behind the mic in public. I went to an amateur caller night in Palm Springs, California, led by an incredible woman, one of the founders of the National Convention, Osa Matthews. The late Osa Matthews out of Palm Springs. She was having an amateur caller night. I drove down there with my parents, a couple of friends, and I called a tip. Gentle on My Mind, the Glenn Campbell tune.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I know it.
So after that, I started doing a couple of guest tips here and there. And then there was a club that was at that dance that they needed an instructor for their beginning class starting in the fall of that year. And they asked me if I'd be interested in teaching it. Well, absolutely. So it was that September, then I got my first gig really as teaching every week. And I taught that club for 3 or 4 years. But that first class, I wish I had all their names and addresses so I can send them a letter of apology.
Oh, I got you. I know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, you know. I believe you really begin to learn how to call by teaching a class.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that.
And then I got a call. There was a caller that I was taking his caller class in the summer of that year named Lee Schmidt.
Okay.
An incredible man, such a showman, such an entertainer, wore very loud outfits.
Gotcha.
And he called me one night and said, I'm feeling under the weather. There's this dance out here. Can you cover it for me? Do you think you can do it? And of course I said, absolutely. So he gives me the name of the club out in San Fernando Valley. And I walked in and it was their anniversary dance, 25 squares.
Great. Goodness. Nice.
My very first full club dance, 25 squares of people.
Yeah.
I walked in, and the round dance cuers, John and Fran Downing, had no idea who I was. The club kind of knew I was coming, but nobody else did. But I did a pretty decent job that night, and then so the phone started ringing. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? And in Southern California, at that point, callers are booking 3 years out. So here I am in the early fall of '82, and I'm looking at an '84, '85 calendar. So it starts to fill up.
Okay.
And kind of the rest is history. I called regularly in Southern California and a few Central California and over in Arizona and a few things like that. And pretty much I called as much as I wanted to. I taught 2 to 3 classes a week when I was really going strong, and also working. So I'm working full time and then trying to call, on the weekends and of course during the days. And so that just continued until I finally retired from my job. And by that time, I was teaching for just one club a week in Southern California, the Shirts and Skirts in Southern California. They're in Anaheim.
Okay.
So then I knew I was going to be retiring, so I had stopped taking bookings, except for a few bookings here and there. And so my wife and I, we moved to Carson City, Nevada. My wife is a very prominent round dance cuer.
Okay.
Yeah. So, in fact, she is a on Round Lab. She does a couple of things. First off, she manages the round dance manual of figures, all the changes and stuff that happens. She keeps the manual current. And then every convention right now, she's in charge of the education. So when Round Lab happens a few days before National, she's in charge of all the education panels that goes on. So, and she's been queuing. She just got her 30-year queuing award from Round Lab. So between up here, she's teaching dances up here, and I've got a few things going up here, and life is good. I wish we had more dancers, but life is good.
Sure. Now, did y'all meet because of square dancing and round dancing, or how'd that happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
We kind of met at a California State Convention.
Okay.
And but we have been married. We got married New Year's Eve of 2022.
Okay.
So just a few months after we moved up here, we tied the knot back down in Southern California. In fact, it was at my good friend Pat Carnathan's house. Right? Okay. He and Monica's house. He has a very, very nice house down in SoCal. And so we got married in the pouring rain on New Year's Eve. We were all huddled under a tent, and we got married on New Year's Eve in the pouring rain.
I'd always heard it never rains in Southern California. I guess it does on occasion.
Yeah, it does. It does. Okay. And we started looking at the weather, about 3 weeks out.
Yeah.
It said that it was going to be iffy. And oh my gosh, it was iffy. We came home the next day, drove back to Carson City from Southern California. A drive that takes about 8 hours from Pat's house took about 10 and a half. We had to take some back roads because it was snowing so badly up where we are. And we got back to our house and we had a foot of snow on the ground. We could barely get the cars over. And before we could even park, I had to shovel snow out of the driveway for a couple of hours after we got home in order to pull the cars in. So yeah, it was a very eventful first day of being married.
Let me go back real quick. Your first dance, you had 25 squares.
Yeah.
Now, how long did you think you've been calling tips, patter, singing calls and all that prior to that?
Well, I had been working on singing calls. Obviously, I'd bought some records. And then Lee Schmidt had a caller class. So I enrolled, and then I was taking that class all summer. So I was calling, patter and singer every week. And
Okay.
then in September, I started teaching for that club. And it was in about a month later, in October of that year, was that dance. Um, so I had enough material. I was really at that point just kind of beginning to learn to sight call.
Okay.
I was doing a lot of modules, a little bit of
Mhm.
reading. I've written some stuff, doing some modules, but I'd start doing some sight calling right, with kind of toward the end of his class. So I went to that dance that night, prepared with some modules, a little bit of reading, and then a little bit of sight. I used everything in my power that
Sure.
dance.
The reason I asked that is because it depends on where I'm at still. If it's a national convention and I look out and I see 20 squares, 15 squares, whatever. Now, not so much, it used to be you couldn't hardly get the needle on the record because your hand would be shaking so much,
Right.
you know. And of course, back when you were starting out, it was all records, and even now, there's times I go up there if I'm coming in behind somebody, I can hardly get the microphone plugged in, because my hand's shaking. And I'm like, what are you doing? I'm doing one tip. I can get through this. But so I can't imagine walking into 25 squares on my first dance from beginning to end. Man, that's good stuff right there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Lee had told me, he said, when you get nervous, he said, it's natural to get nervous. He said, but right before you walk up there on stage, just pretend that everybody in the audience is naked. He said
Okay.
it'll kind of bring a smile to your face, a little bit of a laugh. Hopefully, it'll relax you.
Sure.
And so I've always kind of done that when I've gotten a little nervous calling.
Yeah. I've noticed because like you retired a while back. I just retired in December of last year or this past year. And I knew I was going to do it. And I'd been with that department, with the police department for a while. But, they had a little going away, a little retirement party for me. And a few of the people that I've worked with over the years came in. And when and of course, I did a little like 5-minute speech thanking certain people and all that. Whenever I'm in that, my voice starts shaking. It sounds like I'm about to cry. I can't. But if you put me in front of 10 squares, my voice doesn't I don't know what it is. It just a couple days ago, I talked to a group at a church that I've worked at for years doing traffic and stuff, and my voice started cracking. And I was like, why does this happen? I guess there's a confidence. I feel comfortable in front of square dancers now, so I don't know. That's right into the fire, 25 squares. In all that time in Southern California, and as for the years you've been calling, what other venues, what other places have you called?
Well, you mean in SoCal?
Well, anyway, I mean, have you called in other states, other countries, anything like that? What kind of traveling you done?
Well, most of the traveling I've done has been just regional.
Okay.
I was traveling for my job, so
Mhm.
I got to call in a few places where I was traveling. I got to call in Milwaukee and in
Nice. Okay.
Dallas. In fact, I called with Mike Bramlett.
Okay. I know Mike. I met Mike.
Yeah, down in Dallas. Um, some clubs in Arizona.
Okay.
Went over to Vegas quite frequently, to the clubs in Las Vegas, and then into Central California, Fresno, Northern California. I did some dances in Sacramento, and
Nice.
then and Nevada and Oregon. So basically, mostly just the Western U.S. Besides, because I'm working now, I'm working during the week, so I'm
Mhm.
not the gigs I'm doing on the weekend arranged will be all over Southern California. I may be
Sure.
in San Fernando Valley Friday night and then down in San Diego Saturday night. And the late 70s and 80s, early 80s in Southern California, if you didn't have 15 squares, you had a small dance.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and a lot of us would get together. There was kind of a ritual in Orange County. There's a lot of clubs. Orange County was kind of the central location.
Mhm.
After we would finish our dance, we would all meet at a pizza parlor there in Orange County. And so that most dances back in those days started at 8 o'clock, and they
Right.
went all the way to 11. So it's
Okay.
a 3-hour dance, and then we would load up our equipment, of course, all of our records and everything, hop in the car, and we'd head to the pizza place, get there by 11:30, 11:45, and then we would all call and dance until 2 o'clock in the morning.
Man, that's the
Very,
best.
very familiar. At least once or twice a month, we would all just meet at this pizza place, and the pizza place just shut down, and it was for us. Square dancers showed up, and so we're having 5 and 6 squares in the pizza place, moving all the chairs or moving all the tables out of the way. And that was a fun time. I mean, that
That's
was
so good.
a lot,
That's
a
so
lot,
good.
a lot of great callers in SoCal at that time. Lots and lots of people.
I'd love to get out there at some point, and I know there's still plenty of square dancing out there. And like I say, I know a handful of the callers out in that area. And of course, now we got Jet Roberts from you because he's over here in Alabama, closer to us.
Yep.
So, and but yeah, I'd love to get out there at some point. Of all those places, now years ago, before I started calling, people have told me about it. There were halls that were dedicated just to square dancing. Any
Yeah.
venues like that or anything stand out to you that you called in?
Oh yeah, a place called Cowtown Square Dance Center in
I've heard
Riverside.
of it. Okay.
Still open today,
Okay.
and I still call there once or twice a year. There's still a couple of clubs that are active that dance there. So yeah, and then there was a couple of places in San Fernando Valley that were dedicated. They had a big square dance hall, and then in the side room they had square dance clothes, and apparel. And then there was a place in my neck of the woods back there in the Inland Empire called Square Dance Land,
Okay.
dedicated place. And then there was a place in Orange County in Garden Grove called Cedarbrook Square Dance Center.
Mhm.
And that's since closed down. Square Dance Land has since closed down. The only one really active now, I think, is Cowtown.
Okay.
Still active.
Very nice. I've started asking this to a lot of people. If you could go back and change anything with your square dance calling, what would you change anything?
That's an excellent question. I had thought back in the days when I was kind of getting started, and then I kind of felt like I knew what I was doing. Of course, I still try to get that feeling today. About maybe going national, doing what Tony and Jet and all those guys do. And then I decided against it. I decided no, I didn't want to quit my job and go out on the road. So I think going back, maybe if I could change that, maybe I would have tried that.
Okay.
Back then, if you were, really, really good, it was very lucrative. The guys on the road now, I wonder how they survive, sometimes, because I know it's tough. I know it's tough out there. And
It is. I mean, it's tough, especially if you got a family, because it's you got to travel constantly. There's no downtime. Here, I've got 2 clubs now. One of my clubs dances twice a month. The other one dances once a month. And then I'll book other dances at clubs in the area, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. But there'll be times I go 3 weeks where I might only call one time. And you certainly couldn't survive off of that. I mean, you've got to call every day. So yeah, it would be tough. So now,
Yeah.
do you have your own clubs in Carson City? What are you doing right there?
Yeah, there's the local club here in Carson City called the Capital Cut-Ups.
Okay.
Bev and I are the club caller and cuer for that club. They dance first, third, and fifth Friday. Then our own group called the Dancing Peppers. We have our own little group. It's mostly just for classes. We do host 2-3 dances a year. When we go to Southern California, once or twice a year, we actually host a dance at Cowtown, usually in the afternoon. So that's a Dancing Pepper event. And then we guest call for some of the other clubs occasionally. We don't have many clubs up here. It's a
Gotcha.
struggle. We're all struggling. We're all making a little bit of headway, but not fast enough.
Sure. Now, you had Gentle on My Mind was one of your first records. What are some of your favorite singing calls that you've done?
Well, I was a recording artist for Shakedown Records for
Shakedown. I love Shakedown. Okay.
So I have a fair number of those tunes that are among my favorite. Leap of Faith, Do It Again, Moon Dance, among the many Shakedown tunes that I like. Good Time Charlie's, I think was a
Okay.
rhythm record. Acme and Crest, I really like what Scott Bennett does with his
Yeah.
music. I think he's second only to Pat with making music sound closest to the original. I think Pat's label by far comes the closest overall in with the music compared to the music. But Scott Bennett, I really like what he does. I really do. And then of course I have my fair share of rhythm and royal, but I like Arrow. I like what Dean Singleton does.
Dean is that's a good label. I love Dean Singleton stuff that he puts out.
I've actually probably have more of his patter than anything. I do have a few of his singers, but I really like some of the patter that he does. And Square Dance Bob, SD Bob.
Yeah.
You know what? He has some very creative music.
He does.
Yeah, especially with patter. So
yeah, I've got several of his patterns and a couple singing calls, but I've got a lot of SD Bob's patterns.
Yeah. When I tell people that we're going to do some Pink Floyd, they kind of what?
Yeah.
Pink Floyd.
I've got his he's got a patter and a singing call for REM's "Losing My Religion," and the patter is, it's as close to as the actual song as I've heard a lot of them.
Really?
It's fantastic, and especially being from Georgia, when I tell people I'm going to do an REM song, they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I'll do that, so that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's got a pattern called "Bang a Gong" by T-Rex.
Mm-hmm.
So 80s hard, an 80s rock band that's really pretty cool. But I also go on some of the music platforms, and I look for songs and I look for a karaoke version of the song, and then I will download that and then play with it and see if I can make it work. So I just downloaded I can't remember, Dreams by Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
I just downloaded a karaoke version of that, Dreams, and then I went in and adjusted the speed and everything, and the dancers really like it. It's good. It's kind of mellow, so it's kind of good for advanced. I teach an advanced group on Wednesday night out here, so that's a really good pattern for the advanced group. But yeah, I made a list here. Acme, Too Late to Turn Back Now, Crest, Susie Q, Who'll Stop the Rain, I have probably a dozen or more of those kind of songs that I really like from Scott Bennett, and of course the majority of what Pat does. But yeah, so I kind of run the gamut. I download music from a lot of different labels.
Now I was going to ask you that, and you're kind of telling me what it is. If it's not Square Dance, what's your genre of music that you go to most?
I would say 70s.
70s, okay.
70s and 80s.
Very nice. Yep.
I guess that's the time I grew up. High school and college.
Yeah, I'm a huge 80s guy, so some of Scott's stuff, a lot of TBT records with Ted Lizotte. He's got a ton of 80s on there that's really good.
I just downloaded, I don't know what is, I just downloaded a patter from him. And
One of his newer ones or older ones?
yeah, no, it's one of the newer ones.
Okay.
Um,
I don't
and
know what his newer one.
I'm pulling up my just pulling up my list here. Oh, darn it! I'm sorry to.
No, that's okay.
Hope you can edit this if
I want to know what it is. If I don't have it yet, I got to go get it.
Midnight at the Oasis.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Very nice. I do not have that one yet. I'll have to get hands on that one.
And I downloaded a techno version of My Heart Will Go On, the theme song from Titanic.
Yep. Celine Dion. Yep.
Yeah, the Celine Dion. The techno version really works well.
Okay.
I just got a bunch of different stuff like that I rotate through.
That's it. I've talked to several people about this, whether it be callers or dancers. I know there's a lot of callers have been doing it for 40, 50 years, some, but there's so much music out there now and it's so good. You've got to, and this is my personal opinion, you've got to get music like you're talking about. Go out and buy something that just came out 2 months ago as a pattern. I'm not putting down the old stuff. And the one that pops in my head because I've heard it 1,000 times or more is Boogie Sticks. I don't know what label it is. But one of the gentlemen that I learned to call from, who's passed away, his name's Ray Monty. Every other Friday, we danced twice a month at his club for years before I started calling. Every Friday night, I knew that was the first patter song coming on the first tip. And that's fine. It worked for him. And he was a great caller, and he's one of the main reasons I'm still calling. But that being said, you've got to go out and buy, Midnight at the Oasis. Because some dancers want to hear that. Now, there's some that still want the old stuff, and that's fine. And I still play it on occasion. But, what I was talking about with Ted at TBT, one of my favorite patter songs is Bad Guy, the Billie Eilish song that he's got on there, which is a patter. It's just so good in my ears. So you got to go out and buy music. And I preach that to everybody. Go buy something. Do something for your club. Don't play the same ones over and over again. So that's my little soapbox.
And I've gotten kind of picky in that regard now because, like you said, there is so much good music out there. The square dance labels are producing good music, and you can go on the internet and you can download good music that you can use for patter and things like that. It's the things that I'm kind of getting away from now is the old boom chuck. And Pat preaches this with his labels, to stop if a lot of labels ruin a good song by boom chucking it, and that's all you hear. Now I realize that the dancers, that's the thing in their ear, number one, that the kind of they hear, but man, it gets monotonous.
Yep.
If you're doing that every single record or every single song that you're doing at a dance, and if it's all boom chuck, and I have some boom chuck, I do some boom chuck, but man, I don't do it all night. In fact, I only do it, a partial of the night, maybe one or two records may be boom chuck. The others are just things that are better. They're just better than that.
No, I agree. One of my clubs, we do a 30-minute workshop on whatever they want to do. Mainstream plus, if somebody comes in, man, I am struggling with Relay the Deucey. I'm like, all right, that's going to be our workshop tonight. We have a 30-minute workshop and then a 2-hour dance. Most all the workshops, I will do some kind of boogie sticks, boom chuck, because that's what they're accustomed to. And it doesn't take away from what I'm trying to teach them. I can turn it down, but you can still hear it. But in a dance, I don't do that. I'm going to pull out, dreams or something like that I've found or a record label's put out, especially the singing calls. People want something they can sing along to. So you've got to get some newer music out there. I tell everybody this story. When I started dancing for years, it was music that I didn't know what these songs were because I didn't listen to that type of music. 80s Metallica and Def Leppard and everybody else, and country. But one night, Ray Monty, that gentleman, he played George Strait's Unwound, which was one of my favorite country songs at the time. And when he started singing it, I was like, wait, I know this song. And then I asked him, I said, are there really other square dance songs that are real songs? He said, well, Charlie, they're all real songs, and I said, well, no, I know the words to that song. And so he was like, yeah. And I decided I wanted to be a caller that night. I said, I want to start doing stuff that I know, and
Yeah.
other people do. So,
One of the
I mean,
one
that's
of the
awesome.
things,
It's great to hear that you buy new music and everything.
one of the things that I do, in fact, I do it at the start of every dance. When I say circle left for the first time, I tell everybody while they're circling, tonight we're going to have music by the following people. In fact, my list from this last Friday night, I said, we're going to have some Cat Stevens, Steely Dan, Little River Band, Bob Seger, George Strait, Pitbull, Henry Mancini, Frankie Valli, Elton John, and Cab Calloway. And as
That is
they're
an awesome
circling,
idea.
they're listening and they're thinking, Henry Mancini? And what George Strait song is he going to be doing? So it's a lot of fun. That's how I start my dances, is by telling them kind of the music I'm going to do for them tonight.
Tim, that's an awesome idea. I've never thought of that. That's fantastic. I'll tell them before the tip. I'm like, this is Leonard Skinner, and then I'll go into Scott Bennett's Simple Man.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome. At the beginning of the dance, I never thought of that. I'm going to use that. That's another reason I started this podcast. I know I told you it was to tell stories, but also I am writing things down. And it turned out to be a caller school for me after I realized when I was talking to some of these people. So, man, we've talked a lot about that. You said when one of the reasons you quit in high school was athletics. What type of sports do you like? What kind of hobbies do you have or had?
In high school, I did 3 sports. I ran cross country, I played basketball, and then I also ran track and field.
Okay.
That was back in the days when you could do 3 sports. Nowadays the kids specialize on one sport, and then they can travel
all
and
year.
track leagues, and I even did that with my son, when he was playing. But that's what I did in high school, and then I mostly played basketball.
Okay.
That was my favorite. I mean, I love cross country mainly because I was in shape. I love track and field because I was already in shape from cross country earlier in the year, so there wasn't much of an effort, to stay in shape. And track and field, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I did the hurdles since track and field.
Wow. Okay.
Long jump.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, when we had our opportunity to talk before, you said you had some stories, some that you can't tell, and I understand that. I've got a couple of those. Any other stories or any funny things like that you want to tell us about in your call and stuff?
Yeah, I'm going to tell this one, and I hope Pat doesn't get upset with me. It's Pat Carnathan. I had a Friday night. I was at home, not calling. Friday night at home, and I get a call from Pat. He said, I am on my way to Riverside to do the single swingers. I went, oh, yeah, that's right. You are doing that tonight. I said, isn't their anniversary? He said, yeah. I said, well, good luck. It should be good. He said, I got a problem. He said, I'm in my work van and I forgot to put my equipment from my regular truck into my work van. So I'm heading up to Riverside with nothing. He said, can you run to the hall? Because I'm about a half hour from the hall, and he was still driving from San Diego. And I said, got you covered. Went outside, jumped in my car, already had equipment in the car, got to the dance, went in. I set up all my equipment, got everything going, turned it on, was just doing a sound check when Pat walks in the door onto the stage and takes the microphone from me, and away he goes.
Wow, very nice.
So I stayed for a bit, and then when I went back home, kind of toward the end of the dance, I got up the next day and a 30 pack was on my doorstep.
Okay, very nice. Oh, that's some blind faith right there. Just calling, hoping that you're going to be able to bring stuff over. Wow,
Yeah,
good for that.
but he would do the same for me.
Absolutely. Yep. I had kind of not really the same thing, but this past weekend I had a dance, and Charlie Robertson from Oklahoma
No,
was
Charlie, quite
coming
well.
through, and I put this dance together, and like I was telling you earlier, my equipment has just I'm having some serious issues, and I'm working with Scott Bennett with some speakers and stuff now, but we went into the dance, and the first two tips, it was just the speakers were awful, and luckily, Paul Hensey, Caller Lab, Paul Hensey from Tennessee, he had brought some of his dancers down, and I went to Paul after the second tip, and I said, Paul, please tell me you have some equipment in your truck. And he's like, yeah, buddy, I got 2 sets of equipment. I always travel. And so we went out, got his stuff, brought it in, hooked it up, and so the rest of the night was fantastic. But yeah, that's huge when you get somebody you can grab equipment and borrow it from.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have a pretty good Charlie story.
Yeah, let's
It's,
hear it.
it's relatively clean. I was in Las Vegas at a trade show, and this is when Charlie lived in Vegas. And he said, "Hey," he said, "what time you get off?" He said, "Let's go out. Let's go to dinner." And so he picks me up at my hotel, him and his wife, and we went to dinner. But then we went karaoke bar hopping.
Nice. Okay.
So we had left his car at the restaurant, and we took some taxis around town, and we must have hit a half a dozen or more places that just sang karaoke. So Charlie and I would go in, order drinks, sing a song or two, go out, hop in the cab, and head for another bar. And so that was a lot of fun. And I'm sure our singing did not improve as the night was coming as the night was coming to an end. But man, we
Yeah.
had a great time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's a fairly
Right.
clean Charlie story, I can tell.
No, that's a really good one. That's a really good. Yeah, him and Christy spent the first night with me, and then they went over. I took them over to Hotlanta. I was telling you they did the weekend this past weekend.
Yeah.
And so he's a really good dude. I met him at the Georgia convention a few years back, the national convention, and since then we've kept in contact. And of course, we do all the Caller Lab stuff and everything together. So Charlie's
Great
an
caller.
awesome guy. Yep,
Great
awesome
caller.
guy. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I'm having these speaker product. He didn't bring his equipment because Hotlanta supplies the equipment for you.
Yeah.
So he didn't bring any with him. So we were just going off of mine. And I thought, man, I have waited this long to get Charlie Robertson in Georgia, and I can't even, put a sound system together. Luckily, Paul Hensey, who's always been there for me, he saved us. Oh my goodness. Well, Tim, we're working on about 45 minutes, buddy. I try and keep them around an hour. This has been awesome. Any other stories you want to throw out there? Any other Pat Carnathan stories? Jet Roberts, Charlie Robertsons?
Well, all right, a couple of quick ones.
Okay. Yeah. No, I got no time limit. Go ahead.
National Convention, Long Beach, 2009. It's Saturday morning, and I had wandered into one of the plus halls. They were doing a workshop, and he was doing a workshop on linear cycle and roll and linear cycle. So this is before Caller Lab said it was okay to roll. Recycle. And so Colorado had not approved that. You couldn't do that. So he's teaching this to, I don't know, 15, 20 squares of people. And I'm standing there listening. I'm thinking, this isn't right. I don't think you can actually do that. And I hear this voice next to me going, well, he should be saying recycle and roll as if you could. And it was Jet Roberts. I turned with Jet right next to me going, yeah, you should be adding as if you could.
As if you could. Very nice. Okay.
Yeah. And then, so that very same convention I'm emceeing in the advanced hall. And the last caller of my emceeing is Tony. And there was a caller on before Tony. His name was Don Wood. God rest his soul. He's passed on. He was calling, and I think it was Don. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. Anyway, he's calling A1, and he calls linear cycle. He's got 9 squares on the floor, and he calls from a standard ocean wave setup, linear cycle, finish like a Ferris wheel. And 9 squares did it without hesitation. And Tony turns to me and says, well, I'll be damned. He's just shaking his head. He says, you can't do that from there. But we look on the floor, 9 squares. Sure enough.
Finish like a Ferris wheel. Great goodness. I can tell you what's going to happen next Thursday at my club.
Well, if your dancers cheat on that Ferris wheel and the guy's reaching back and taking the girl, they just, for some reason, they just flow right into it.
That is fantastic. I love that. Yeah.
I was telling that story at my last club dance to Rick Gettleman. Do you know Rick Gettleman?
I know Rick. Yep.
Yeah, he's a national caller out of Arizona.
Yep.
So he was up in Carson City, and he was in the back of the hall. And I told that story. I said, "Look, I'm going to do it and watch the people." So my next tip, I got up and I called linear cycle, finish like a Ferris wheel, and everybody did it. And Rick's in the back just shaking his head like, "Why? How?" I said, "Hey, see?"
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Rick gets through Georgia pretty regular sometimes when he's traveling, and so I've had the opportunity to call with him and watch and dance to him a lot in the past.
Great guy. His girlfriend just passed away, by the way.
Yeah, I saw that. That's a shame.
Yeah, Rick's a great guy.
Yeah. Tim, it has been my pleasure. But before we go, wait a minute. Now, what are your plans coming? You got any travel? You're going to Caller Lab this year? Are you going to any of the conventions?
I'm not going to make Caller Lab this year.
Okay.
More than likely, we will be at USA West in Spokane. Okay. We're not going to be at National. Bev is going to be at Rounda Lab in Little Rock. We will be at Caller Lab next year.
Next year. Okay.
It's in Reno. It's a half hour from my house. And that's also the convention that I do believe will be deciding and talking about what calls are going to go where, because I do believe the proposal will pass.
Yeah.
This Caller Lab. I think there will be some dissension here and there, but overall, I think it will pass. And then the next year, I think there's some ad hoc committees kind of working on this stuff right now. But in 26 is where we're going to decide what calls are where and what calls are not, what calls are dropped. So that's a big convention. So you guys out there, anybody that listens to this podcast, if you can go to Caller Lab this year, great. It's the 50th. I wish we can make it. But next year in Reno is a biggie. It's going to decide the future of our activity.
I agree. Yeah, I'm hoping it does pass. I don't see why it wouldn't pass. And yes, there's always going to be, when you have a group as big as ours, there's always going to be some dissension and dislike, and that's fine. I mean, if everybody was behind it, I'd be suspicious of it at that point with anything. But I think it's a great idea, and I hope it passes. And I've been to Reno once. One of the last conventions, I guess Caller Lab was out there about 5 years ago. With the last time they were in Reno. Yeah,
it actually was in 2020. It was in 23. The last time it went west, it was in Reno 23.
Okay.
But so it's going to be in Reno again in 26.
Okay. So
you got to make sure you make it out there.
We will definitely be at that. I started with Caller Lab in 2014, and I guess around 2018. I finally, I didn't know what conventions were. In 2018, somewhere around there is when I went to my first one, and I was just like, wow. Another Scott Bennett story. I remember I knew who Scott Bennett was. I've had a couple of his songs back in that year, 2017, 2018, whenever it was. And he was sitting behind a little table with like some memory sticks with songs he was selling or whatever. And I remember I was walking with my wife, and I was like, oh my God, that's Scott Bennett. Look, it's Scott Bennett. And she's like, who is Scott Bennett? And the rock stars. And then you realize that, they're just, awesome dudes. And I've spent a lot of time with Scott over the years now. And so
he was just
yeah.
out here at Silver State. Our big convention in Nevada is Silver State. It's over Mother's Day weekend. And
Okay.
Scott was one of the featured callers last year between him and Jack. Jack.
Yeah.
He
Jack
was out here too. But yeah, I got a chance to pick Scott's brain a little bit. At that point, he wasn't going to be producing any more music because he couldn't find the right people. I think he was missing some people in order to do his music. And then recently, of course, he came out with some more things. And I was glad to see that. I was doing cartwheels that he wasn't. He's still going to be making music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This guy, he's a good dude.
Yeah, he is. And I've never met Dean. And I've never met Dean Singleton. So when I get a chance, I'm going to let him know.
Oh, you haven't met him? Okay.
I have not met him. I've not met him.
I'd seen him a few times. I met him last year. I was at Pride RV in North Carolina, Tony's place, and taking a school. I was taking part in a school, and Dean is starting his caller coach journey, and so he was getting that week for hours, and I got to spend a week with him, and just a great dude to talk to. That's where I found out about his music, really. I mean, I still get his emails, but, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention. But then I started, and I bought up a ton of his stuff while I was sitting there talking to him. We've got just an incredible talent all across the country of callers that are just phenomenal. I mean, and I know we need to have, some newer guys, coming in. And we do, but there's just some phenomenal people out there calling that I would enjoy dancing to. People that I would drive 2 and 3 or 4 hours to their dance, to dance. I tell everybody that I have, that guys, if you're within 100 miles of Atlanta, Georgia, let me know and I'll be there. I can go a little further now that I've retired. I could probably put 150 on at the drop of a hat if you need me to, most times. But Tim, unfortunately, it looks like it's going to have to be Reno before we can actually sit down together. I tell everybody, the first round's on me when that time comes around. And then there's no limit to the rounds. As long as you want to do that, we'll keep doing that.
Oh, absolutely. So, Charlie,
absolutely.
You know what? I appreciate what you do. I love, watching, these interviews that you do. And I've garnered some nice little tidbits here and there.
Outstanding.
And so I do appreciate, your efforts in this, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, sir. It's been my pleasure. I do this just so you might pick up something that you didn't know about somebody, or something about square dancing. And I love sitting down and doing these things.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Linear cycle,
brother.
Linear cycle.
Linear cycle, finished like a Ferris wheel. I got it written right there. There's a club in Calhoun, Georgia that's going to hear that in about 11 days. So
you'll have to send me an email. Let me know how it goes.
I'm going to get it put together. I got the email with the Ghost Rider stuff. I'm going to see if I can attach that, some of your singing stuff onto this video. I'll get it all put together and hopefully get it out this Friday.
Well, I appreciate that. That was done at Scott Byers' memorial dance.
Okay.
Byers,
I met Scott once.
Yeah.
At a convention, and really nice guy. I didn't get to spend much time with him. Yep.
Yeah. So they had a celebration dance. So they had the Ghost Riders, because the Ghost Riders live, their home base is Northern California. So that dance was in Roseville at his memorial dance. So I would have the pleasure and the honor of being able to call at that.
Absolutely. Tim, it's been a pleasure getting to talk to you, sir, and meet you. And somewhere down the road, probably Reno, we'll be able to sit down together.
Well, Charlie, thank you very much for the time, and enjoyed talking with you.
Yes, sir. You have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
Yes, sir. We'll talk to you. Bye-bye.
He says he wants her, can't live without her. Why didn't I think of that? Poor boys promenade, are gonna walk inside the ring now. I get back and swing with her lady. Join hands, circle to the left, gonna walk around the ring now. I look down a man and you weep. Oh, now that she's gone, I know what I did wrong. It's all so simple in fact. He says he needs her, tells her he loves her. Why didn't I think of that? Swinger boys, he says he loves